I am ecstatic about eating these puppies.
That's the reaction. Was that not amazing?
There's an out route. Oh, it's picked!
Are you kidding me? It's a scrum in the middle of the field. There's Gibson just pulling his way through that entire War Eagles defense.
On his senior night, Chaplin escapes. What a start with a touchdown. Leaning tower of pretzels.
What's up, everybody? High school football is back, and here on Piedmont Powwow, we talk 336 area code football. We're partnered with Friday Night Rivals Game of the Week, presented by My48. It's a fantastic way to highlight high school football. I'm Evan Budrovich. I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm a North Carolinian now, the last 10 years, and I've fallen in love with high school football, and I'm joined by Mark Covert, who played football and knows the sport a lot more than I do.
Well, I don't know about a lot more, but yes, played at the high school and the collegiate level at Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina. So very excited to see a lot of the young talent that we have here across the state, but specifically within the Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and High Point area, as we'll see a lot of that this year.
Mark was an offensive lineman. I played linebacker and defensive lineman, so we kind of counter each other with how we present the game a little bit too.
Yeah, it's a fun little playful banter that we have a lot of the time. Evan knows that if we got back out on the field, I'd punish him, but we don't have to worry about that. We just stay up in the booth where we belong at this point.
We'll keep the swim moves conversation for later. So this is week 2 of the high school football season, but week 1 for us, we'll have the next 10 weeks of games. And Mark, we get a neat 4A, 3A matchup. West Forsyth, who reloads at quarterback. They reload offensively with 3 new starting offensive linemen, but a really good program under Kevin Wallace. And then Oak Grove, who has started to dominate the mid-Piedmont 3A. We saw them at Ledford last year win the league and be impressive. These are 2 programs that look to be playoff contenders right off the jump.
They sure do, and it's really an old school style of football for both of them. I think when you talk about West Forsyth, there's a team that loves to play a hard-nosed brand of football, offensively running the football, defensively getting after it and staying physical around the line of scrimmage. Oak Grove's a team that really falls in love with the option. We saw that plenty of times last year against Ledford and how they utilize that to move the ball down the field. So if you love that old school brand of football, Oak Grove, West Forsyth is going to be your dream matchup, especially here in week 2 of the high school season.
So Oak Grove, the last 2 years, has had amazing running backs. 2 years ago, Isaiah McGuffin, who was built like a middle linebacker, but they taught him to play running back. He ran for over 1,000 yards. And then the scat back, Carson Williams, who's now a senior, he's put on 20 pounds. He ran for 100 yards last week. And Mark, it's not thunder lightning of Lendale White and Reggie Bush, but that combo of Jaden Glenn and Carson Williams, they can really pound the football.
I saw your California come out there for a second, but it's a good comparison in a way, right? I mean, this is a guy who can run the football, and it's almost deceptive because in the way he does it, it's between the tackles. There's a lot of that damage that he does where he can get outside, and we know he has the speed and the athleticism to make plays on the edge. But once he gets inside, he can really mess it up a little bit. He's a guy that diminutive in size, but able to get in there with the big fellas, make noise, and a lot of times can skirt out for a bigger gain than what you might anticipate in between those 2 tackles on the inside.
The NFL comp, when we talked to the coaching staff, was Darren Sproles, right? You think little ball of lightning, but he can explode. And I know you'll love this. So we have power 4 linemen on both sides of the ball. Ben Boulware for Oak Grove. He has Florida State offers, Georgia offers, and he's 6'5", 290. I mean, the guy's gigantic. On the defensive line, there's a guy named Turtle, Davion Eldridge, whose brother Daviel and his other brother is a safety, Davier Eldridge. But Big Turtle, I got to look up the numbers here. Oh, yeah. He's 6'4", 295. So he's big. And then Cuthrell Keenan, his fellow D lineman's called Juicy, and he has power 4 offers, and he's also 300 plus. So, Mark, there's a lot of meat and potatoes on the offensive line.
Oh, man, there are. And you love to see that framework, right? Like the college scouts are coming there and you want to see, guys, you're not really looking for tacticians at the high school level, right? It's like, hey, who's the big dude standing over there? I could probably do something with him. That's the guy you want to settle down with. And when you have framework like that, you can build into it. And as you get older, you start to see that, they might be tall and lanky when they come in as freshmen and sophomores, but the weight room cometh. And once that finally hits and they get bulked up and they find their way on the football field, it's game over. So I'm really excited, especially in this matchup. Again, we talked about how it's an older style of brand of football. I want to see how these guys respond, because this is a game that really, for their own skill set, is tailor-made for them. And not to put pressure, of course, but if you're a scout, you're certainly watching a matchup like this where you can see, hey, is this guy strong at the point of attack? Is he physical? Is he dominating up front and doing what he needs to do? That's going to be the conversation that takes place, and I can't wait for this matchup.
Yeah, Oak Grove, 3 seniors on that offensive line, and they ran the ball for 2,000 yards last year. And then West Forsyth, they bring 3 starters back in a 4-3 defensive front. Now it's interesting because last year West ran the ball right up down the field, and they beat Oak Grove by 2 touchdowns. It was a close game until the 4th. But if you're Oak Grove, you have this freshman linebacker. You know, we talk a lot about last year players who come on the scene and make an impact. But how about 120 tackles from Bradley Bird as a freshman? Now he's a sophomore, and he's one of the best players in the state.
Well, you got to think, when you're a freshman, you're not acting on anything but almost instinct, right? So now the game, as you go along, slows down. And that's where it becomes fun to watch players like this, because now you're talking about a guy who's not just reacting and is good instinctually on the football field, but he also plays now with intelligence. And when you're able to put that all together and you go into the film room and you're studying, you know the playbook, you can take that and your natural instincts, combine it together. You get a linebacker like that, especially at such a young age, it's something you can build your defense off of for the next couple of years. And it's going to be a huge boon to what they do, because you've got a guy like that that's going to be an enforcer. Now, with this matchup, we're talking about, again, a West Forsyth team that does not have Kalen Chaplin, their running back last year, who went on to, I believe it was Fayetteville State.
Fayetteville State, yeah, D2.
This is a guy that we saw that we were always impressed with, and he was just churning out yards, even when we saw them against East Forsyth at the end of the season last year. You don't have a guy like that. So now it's a different challenge. But when you have linebackers that can go up and muck it up inside that offensive line and find those ball carriers, it's a huge advantage, especially for such a young guy.
How about 2,200 yards for Chaplin last year? That was top 5 in the state. But what West has brought in, so the last 2 years, and I give credit to Kevin Wallace, transfers in the conference with the transfer rules in Forsyth County. You can go high school to high school. And here comes Riley Horton from Parkland. They haven't been great traditionally, Parkland, but he's a dual threat quarterback. He runs for 100 yards. And now this offense that was very dink and dunk last year kind of has a dual threat aspect to it.
And even from that standpoint, I don't know that it was very consistent. I think we always expected, especially last year, we saw Burt Rice, and we kind of expected, like, okay, this is the year that West Forsyth is able to put the ball in the air and you find that balance alongside Chaplin. It just never really happened. And so now you bring in a guy like Wharton, who, like you said, dual threat guy, but opens the offense up more because of it. If they can find room through the air, and that's a big ask because of what they have done the last couple of years, that poses a completely different threat than what the Titans have posed to the rest of the conference in the area the last few years. So if they can find a way to get the ball in the air and pass it effectively, we're not talking about, constant deep shots over the head. If they can do that, great, awesome. But it's just finding consistency in the air. If they can find that, that makes a big difference. And Horton on paper gives them a huge advantage in that area and a really good start.
One more player. Each week we want to highlight a guy that we'll try to bring up these stories in the broadcast, but they're hard to mix in throughout the game. But senior receiver Sam Bennett for Oak Grove. He's the one returning starter at wide receiver. So in his free time, his family raises goats, and he's working on this goat yoga program where he's training the goats and getting them the fitness. And, Sam, we'll talk about his skill set, but the fact he's a farmer and his family lives out in the middle of Forsyth County, and they can enjoy in Davidson County as well, and kind of have that fun, not just football too.
Isn't it funny that you get an offense that runs the triple option and just option reads as much as they do, and you get a guy out wide at wide receiver he's a goat farmer. Cool. He can block probably, right? So it really helps you there in that regard. But it's such a fun aspect of what this offense does, right? I mean, you talk about an offense that you don't pass the ball a whole lot. Now, Oak Grove will put it in the air. Don't get it twisted. It's not just going to be, 3 yards in a cloud of dust and we're all done. This is an offense that's going to put the ball in the air. And really, Bennett is going to have to be the centerpiece of what they do passing-wise this year. As their only returning starter at wide receiver, he's got to be the guy that carries the load. But he can certainly mix it up. A really complete wide receiver from that aspect. It's going to be fun to watch him this Friday.
Last week, 3 catches, 97 yards. So boom,
Yep.
he comes right in and makes it happen. That game's this Friday. You can watch on My 48 TV. This year on My 48's Facebook page, a live stream, and YouTube. So you can watch it anywhere, not just here in the Triad. You can go all over the country and watch it.
Got options. Got options.
And if you want to watch us on camera for a few minutes, we'll open it up at 7:30 with an open. Mark, let's dive into 336 football here in the Triad. Grimsley had come in as the prohibitive state title contending team. We know Faison Brandon is in the news for many reasons, but his team's really good too. And I want to touch on his running back, Mitchell Summers, 5 touchdowns in his debut. That's a really good Mount Tabor team that Grimsley went right up the field and beat with the running game.
And I know we'll see Mount Tabor a couple of times this year, as well as Grimsley. But, you talk about a Tabor team that historically, under Tyshawn Brown, has had a really good defense, especially up front, very hard-nosed and physical. You thought Faison Brandon was the problem. It's okay. You should probably worry about Mitchell Summers too. And it's almost not fair.
Right, because last year it was Terrell Anderson and these 3-star wide receivers, and now it's just athleticism and running.
Yeah, across the board. And this is exactly what the Grimsley Whirlies love to do. They get guys in space. They're able to make plays. And it doesn't matter if it is Faison Brandon, if it is Mitchell Summers, like whoever it ends up being, it's an embarrassment of riches for Coach Brown over there. And something that really, when you go through the film, how do you stop it? And it's almost an unfair question to ask, and you don't want to do that to other teams, but you got to pick your poison. And either way, the poison's going to be pretty potent. So having another guy who had 5 touchdowns against such a good athletic defense that has a couple of D1 guys on it, mind you, in Mount Tabor, to run through them like that was impressive. And really, I think the start of another great season for the Whirlies over there in Grimsley.
You talked to Daryl Brown, their head coach, and he's always pushing for more, right? Because he knows the Weddingtons, the Newburns, the Butlers of the state. But he said, hey, for this year, we're not as experienced at receiver. We have Caden Cateau coming back. And what does he do? 10 receptions, 80 yards, right? Like you just fill the void of an NC State and a UNC receiver back to back. Yep. But to Grimsley's credit, Mount Tabor first half, very competitive. Same thing last year. And that game was at Tabor last year. But man, Grimsley, because we see what Weddington's done, and they go out and get a really good win over Providence Day. Now Grimsley's in the top 3 in the state. Like this is the year. If you're Grimsley, you have a real chance to host all the way to the region finals against a Weddington.
And I think really that's where the early conversation is now, where you talk about those 4A state finals. And right before there, once you get to your regional finals between the east and the west sides of the state, Weddington Grimsley is going to be the far and away favorite matchup as far as odds-on favorites to get there together, and that be the game we see. To go and beat Providence Day, a nationally ranked team in Providence Day is huge for Weddington. So Grimsley's got to look across the board. And there's never going to be a time where you stop getting better. And they know that because Grimsley will play their regular season games. They will win a ton of games. And you would expect them to go deep in the playoffs. No matter what coach you sit down with, they'll tell you like, hey, we're all about 1-0 this week, 1-0 this week. And that's true. The other eye is going the other way, and they're seeing what else is going on around them and what their competition looks like. And certainly for Coach Brown and Grimsley, you pay attention to Weddington, you pay attention to Butler, you pay attention to Chambers. I mean, all these schools that you have to go through.
And how about this week, Rollsville, that just dominated a Charlotte program in Butler, and they put up 64. Yeah. Like their quarterback's going power 4. He's slinging the ball around the field. Like this is sometimes in college football, you get these interconference, let's say Tennessee versus NC State. Like this is the level of matchup we get in week 2 of the high school season.
Yeah, and that's where the interstates kind of stuff is fun, right? Like you get the conference play and it's rivalries and you get your traditions there. But this in the early slates of the year, you start having these huge matchups where it makes a huge difference. And you see, especially early on, like what kind of team you have. I mean, for Rollsville to go down to Butler and win on the road in the way that they did by several touchdowns is massively impressive. And you've got those teams that do that. I mean, it's across the board. You get these interstate games, and it's a lot of fun to watch, seeing how they all roll out. But that's the reward for Grimsley or Weddington or any of these teams out west. Cool, you won the West, you get to go to a state title game. Rollsville is probably going to be one of those teams you have to worry about once you get there.
You know, the scary thing, Rollsville was the 1 seed in the East, to your point. In that game last year, Faison Brandon 220 yards passing. So he diced him. I'll be curious how he does this Friday. I want to touch on maybe the most dominant team in the state right now, the Reidsville Rams.
Yeah.
They're the 3-time state champs, Mark. Now, we've seen Independence win 6 straight. They're sort of in a tier now, even without their best tight end who went on to Providence Day. In comes Deontay Neal. We know how good Al Lee was, a 2-time state quarterback champ. And Neal, who was the receiver and the DB last year, throws for 100 yards. He runs for 2 touchdowns. And Reidsville just rolls in their 2A opener.
Well, you're going to tell me that a 5'9", 160-pound kid picked up his 16th interception of his career last Friday. Oh, and by the way, as a quarterback, he scored 4 touchdowns. His first start as a high school quarterback. Kid's pretty good. Oh, by the way, he also plays basketball. Really good point guard as well. I mean, it's the list goes on and on and on for Deontay Neal, and it's something that's super impressive because you get a lot of the guys and you see how the multi-sport athletes are starting to take over and dominate. That's been the big move here the last probably decade or so, to get kids to play more than one sport in high school, give them that growth so they're able to work different muscle groups and they learn different things, and it helps translate across the board to other sports. What you learn in one thing, you can find a way to translate into another sport. So for him, it's been super impressive to see that. But at his size, and teams are going to start finding their way around. Colleges are going to start finding their way around because they know where Reidsville, North Carolina is. They know where the football capital of North Carolina is. And they went there, as you mentioned, the tight end, Kendra Harrison. He now went on, like you said, to Providence Day. They were scouting him. Don't be fooled, because Deontay Neal was certainly being watched as well. And 5'9" means next to nothing, because we've seen some superstars at the collegiate level at that size, if not smaller, have made a lot of noise. We're going to see him in a couple weeks. I am giddy to finally see him again in person and see what happens, because every single time he touches the football, you're holding your breath. And now he's touching the football almost every single play at the quarterback spot. So it's going to be magical. I can't wait to track him as the year goes on as well.
To your point, Reidsville, 19 state championships, Tarboro right there with the Tarboro T, and they're in a state final almost every year. Those are the elite programs. I do want to wrap up with some of the new faces in the league. How about High Point Christian Academy? And we've talked about Jalen Moore at Reagan for years. So he comes out, and you play independent football, different competition, but Mark, another 200-yard day, 4 more touchdowns. Like, Mitchell Summers is a tier. And then maybe in the state, the next best running back is our guy from High Point Christian.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Moore is he's something. I mean, electrifying as all get out, very elusive in the open field, and the straight line speed is there. And in a league that High Point Christian plays in, where you've got to have some more vulnerable defenses, those numbers are going to be big for Jalen Moore. I know we'll be tracking him as well, but when we saw him, I believe twice last year, you just kept chunking yards after yards.
Yeah, the 5-touchdown game against Glenn.
Right. And that's impressive. You're in league play at that point. You're able to roll through that. I mean, it's a lot. And when you know you're the center of an offense like that, like Jalen Moore is, that it's incredible that he's able to have the production that he has. Just a guy that is uber talented. He's going to continue to make his name known around the state, and hopefully he finds himself continuing to push that, and we see him later on down the road in some of those lists where you start saying, hey, who's the best player in the state of North Carolina? You get to that running back spot, you've got to say Jalen Moore. He's going to prove that as the season goes on as well.
Worth noting, the state record, I had to look this up this week, 3,794 yards in a single season. Kevin Parks of West Rowan. This was about 15 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's on pace for about 300 a game, he's got a chance.
He's got a shot.
And he got to 240 last week, so you never know.
He's got some work to do for sure, but he's got a shot. We're only going into week 2.
Lastly, as we go into this week, we have the Oak Grove West Forsyth game. Mark, I'm going to pull the Kirk Herbstreit here. We're going to do some predictions, because this is the game we have, and we'll have Dave Gorin, longtime sports reporter, on the sidelines. For me personally, what Oak Grove has built as a program, this is a 6-year-old school, 5 years of football. They've won the league now twice. Them and Ledford have legitimized themselves as 3A powers. And without Connor Creech, who's now playing at a Division III program in Virginia, he was the do-it-all, homecoming king, program leader. And in comes a true freshman who's now a sophomore and starting at quarterback. Like, I'm buying Oak Grove stock. Now, this may be an upset pick, but my pick this week is Oak Grove to win a 28-24 just battle on Friday Night Rivals.
I like that pick, and it's a solid pick. I think Oak Grove, as you said, in 6 years, I mean, the stuff that they have done, the success that they've had has been unprecedented, and it's super respectable. I think they've got a real good shot at pulling the road win out, but West Forsyth, I know there's some turnover there. I think being at home, playing in front of that home crowd in week 2, knowing they come off of a very impressive win themselves against AC Reynolds last week, you got a little bit of momentum going forward. You get that first game out of the way, a lot of those unknowns go away. You know who your team is as a coaching staff. I think West Forsyth has a chance to pull this one off, and I think they do. They start the season 2-0 at home against Oak Grove.
West Forsyth, 200 yards rushing and no defensive touchdowns. It was a special team touchdown they allowed. So that defense, now I'm second guessing my pick, but that's how it works.
You got to have confidence, man. You got to have, look, if you put the headgear on, you've got to wear that thing until the clock strikes 0 in the fourth quarter.
Well, good news. I don't have a Grizzly hat. Thank you guys for joining us this week. Mark Covert is excellent. We'll break down our picks throughout the week. And then coming up next week, we have a unique matchup. Bishop McGuinness. We'll kind of profile some of the Catholic local schools, and they'll take on Providence Grove, a newer program, new coach, and I think there's some neat storylines in that. But for Mark, I'm Evan. Watch the game this Friday, and we know we'll have some fun here on Piedmont Powwow.